else, I'm not going to wear life with a prime minister where he says one thing in public and another in private. Some of you may have seen that little speech he gave in Sault Ste. Marie when he didn't think the cameras were rolling, didn't think anybody who disagreed with him was listening. He said very clearly, I'm not putting words in his mouth, these are pretty well what he said. He said, we need a majority government so we can teach Canadians a lesson. What Canadians was he talking about? He was talking about 65% of the Canadian population that didn't vote for him in 2008. That's who he was talking about. He was talking about, he was describing as left-wing ideologues, judges who do their job. Now, everybody in this room will have a disagreement with a judge sometimes. We live in a democracy. But the independence of the judiciary, okay, political science class, you know what I'm talking about here? The independence of the judiciary is the root and foundation of the democracy of Canada. Understand? And women who take care of other women in shelters, women fleeing abusive relationships or looked after in shelters run by devoted women, those people are not left-wing ideologues. They're good, compassionate Canadians. A prime minister who does not respect some of the basic institutions of our country. And we have a prime minister who thinks that everybody who opposes him is an enemy, to be crushed. And I just don't see public life that way. In Canada, we have disagreements. Sometimes they're serious disagreements. Sometimes they're searing disagreements. Sometimes they pit faith against faith and community against community. Français contre Anglais parfois. Et nous avons vécu tout ça, les divisions au sein de notre pays. Mais on n'a jamais traité un Canadien comme l'ennemi de l'autre. Et on ne va jamais traiter un Canadien comme l'ennemi de l'autre si moi, je suis Premier ministre du Canada. So I disagree with the policies, but I disagree fundamentally, and I think you disagree too, with the way the Prime Minister conducts politics in our country. This sense of you're with me or you're against me, you're not an adversary, you're an enemy to be destroyed. You can't run this country like that. You'll divide this country, you'll tear it apart, and we're going to stand against it and stop it cold. As they say, Stephen Harper gives you so many opportunities to disagree with the policy, with the record, and the way he does politics. I could go on all afternoon. But it's not enough for liberals to just be against something. We got to be for something. We got to be positive. The reason that the people of Canada have given us their confidence and their trust year after year, decade after decade, is we offered them a positive vision. And it's a positive vision based on something very, two very simple ideas. One of them is that to have a great country, to have a great Canada, you have to have a strong, common sense, practical federal government that is there to help Canadians. It's a positive vision of government. Mr. Harper thinks no government would be better than any government. He said in the summer he never saw a tax he liked. And if you think about that a little, it takes you somewhere you really don't want to go. Okay? My wife was in a preemie unit in Cape Breton Island this summer when he gave that remark about I've never met a tax I like. And you thought to yourself, who is paying for this nurse to keep this baby alive? Who's paying for the copper and the beat? Right? Who's paying for the fireman? Right? You pay taxes not because you like to, but because this is what keeps our country together. This positive vision of government, people standing together. That nurse in that preemie ward is paid for by your tax dollars because you believe that in a good Canada, every little kid that comes out in the world deserves a chance to stand and grow. That's why you pay your taxes. We don't want big government. We don't want intrusive government. God knows government makes some mistakes. But we know at the end of the day, unless you have a strong, compassionate, smart federal government, you might not have a Canada at all. So that's belief number one that we have. The other thing we believe passionately, and this gets to the economic story, is we're looking at a deep recession. We're bumping along the bottom. How do we start getting growth again? Because growth is the key. We've got a huge deficit. It menaces our capacity to fund post-secondary education. It menaces our capacity to provide decent health care. It's putting our pensions at risk. It's putting your future at risk. We've got to dig ourselves out of that hole. The only way I know is growth. Getting growth going in this economy. We're stuttering along at kind of, almost no growth at all. We've got to get it up to 2-3%. And one of the basic things a liberal understands is you can't do that without smart government. You've got to have government that invests in creating new markets in India and China. If you want growth, you got to go where the growth is. Where is the growth? You all know it. It's India and China. And where has the Prime Minister been over the last 4 years? I can tell you one thing. He hasn't been to Beijing, and he hasn't been to New Delhi. He hasn't been to India and China. You can't get growth in this economy unless you have a federal government that leads. You can't get growth in this economy unless you've got a government that's investing in your skills and education so that you can be the most qualified labor force in the world. You can't get growth unless you've got a government helping companies to invest in new plant and machinery. You can't get growth unless you have a vision of where is the puck going? Where are the new technologies that we have to create for tomorrow? This stuff doesn't happen on its own. The conservatives believe you just let the market miracle take over. Well, we did that, okay? We did that. On September 2008, the bottom fell out of the global economy. It fell out fast, right? We'd had 20 years of the market miracle. We'd had 20 years of this conservative ideology that said, just leave it to the market and everything will be fine. And look what happened when Lehman went down. You all know and you all lived it. The second it went down, where did the whole world go to? They went to government, on their hands and knees, saying, save us. That is when everybody in the world understood what liberals have understood since the beginning of time. Unless you have a government guaranteeing compassion, security, and basic floor under people's feet, you go to the wall. Liberals understood